Go.
Well, this is June 3rd, 2025. Welcome to the DVMUG Zoom meeting. We'll be presenting in the regular fashion of news, followed by videos, miscellaneous questions and answers, and social hours. This week's news. Here's a summary of this week's news, or list of the news items, that is. And this slide is to remind remind me to tell you that this is on the BBS, and you can access these by clicking on the URLs in order to read in more detail. Following our synopses on these news items. Number one, Apple doubles down on India with third store amid U.S. tensions, presented by Marcus Mendes of 9to5Mac.com. Store location and size. Apple's third Indian store will be at Bengalura's Phoenix Mall of Asia, occupying 8,000 square feet. Lease terms for 10 years. 10-year lease includes a revenue sharing component starting at 2% and increasing to 2.5% after 3 years. There's an expansion strategy which says that Apple plans to open 4 new retail stores in India, including locations in Pune, Mumbai, Delhi, NCR, and again in Bengaluru. Bengaluru is a population of 14.4 million, so I guess they can use a second store. They plan a production shift into India. Apple expects to manufacture most iPhones and other products in India and Vietnam for the U.S. market. Any comments or questions on that news item?
That's a sweet lease. The landlord getting not only rent, but 2% of their net profits.
Increasing to 2.5%.
Yeah, he's
Mhm.
going to be pretty happy with that one.
Second item, Apple remains the lone big tech stock in the red post-Trump tariff turmoil. Marcus Menendez again from 9to5Mac.com. Most tech stocks have recovered from the initial dip after Trump's tariff announcements, except for Apple. Apple is facing the fallout of the U.S.-China trade war, the need to prove diversification efforts, and Trump's criticism of Tim Cook. Apple stock is underperforming compared to its peers due to uncertainty surrounding trade policies, lack of clear AI strategy, and geopolitical risks. Uncertainty surrounding U.S. trade policies, particularly tariffs on the Chinese goods, is negatively impacting Apple stock and its suppliers. Apple is perceived as lagging behind tech giants like Amazon, Google, and Microsoft in the AI race, which is negatively affecting investor sentiment. Comments or questions on that news item? Moving on. Apple is reportedly dropping support for nearly every Intel Mac this year. Roman Loyola of Macworld.com. Apple will unify its operating system versioning to 26. Supported Macs 2019 or later MacBook Pro, M1 or later MacBook Air, 2020 or later iMac, M1 or later Mac Mini, all Mac Studio models, and 2019 or later Mac Pro. Unsupported Macs include recent Intel MacBook Air and Mac Mini models and the iMac Pro. Apple is phasing out support for Intel-based Macs with the 2019 MacBook Pro and the 2025 iMac likely to be dropped next year. The 2019 Mac Pro may remain supported longer due to its high-end processor and recent Apple Silicon replacement. Comments or questions?
Well, another comment, I was surprised to see that one of the guys on the bulletin board today said that he's using a Mac that's from 2017.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Um, my Mac is from 2015, and I went into the store today to buy one, but they no longer take checks.
Is that right?
Yeah, and I didn't have I've got a new credit card that only allows me to spend $1,000 a day. So they said, well, you can go walk to the bank and bring in your $3,000 and we'll do it.
Wow.
Forget it. It was my
They
speakers
don't
that
take
went out
checks.
last week when I was complaining that I couldn't hear anything. My speakers went out on my computer.
Well, that's not all that went out.
Oh, no, lots of things went out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Next item. Qualcomm sponsored study shockingly shows Qualcomm's modems beating Apple's C1, according to Jason Cross, Macworld. Test result: Android phones with Qualcomm modems outperformed the iPhone 16e in download and upload speeds. The report, commissioned by Qualcomm, lacks transparency regarding the tested Android devices and their specifications. The limited scope of the tests, commissioned by Qualcomm, raises questions about the report's objectivity. The test was limited to 3 locations in a single neighborhood, used only T-Mobile's network, and compared the iPhone 16e to an unnamed Android phones. To Ookla, the speed test report, based on data from many users across the country, showed the gap between the iPhone 16 and iPhone 16e was widest on the T-Mobile's network, suggesting that it's the network that might have some impact on that study. Apple's objective is that the C1 modem aims to provide a comparable experience to mid-tier products with good stability and emphasize lower power utilization, with future modems expected to outperform Qualcomm's offerings. Comments or questions? Move on to the videos. This is a reminder to tell you that these are on the VBS summaries in addition to just the title on the BBS.
They're also in the chat.
Okay. First video by Gary Rosenzweig, MacMost.com, how to use the ports on your Mac correctly. Your Mac may come with a mix of Thunderbolt and USB ports. What are the differences and when should you use each? How about the HDMI port?
Hi, this is Gary with MacMost.com. Let's talk about the connection ports on your Mac. So I often hear from people that they're confused about the ports on the back of their Mac. What can they be used for, and which is the proper one to plug various devices into? Here's the back of a 2023 iMac. And you can see there are 4 small ports at the bottom left. 2 of them don't have any label at all, and 2 of them have this little lightning bolt symbol. Let's take a closer look here, and you can see how 2 are labeled and 2 aren't. Well, the 2 unlabeled ones on the left are USB ports, and the 2 with the little lightning bolts, they are Thunderbolt ports. What's the difference, and when should you use each one? First, it's important to understand something about the term USB. It refers to both the shape of the port and to the speed of the data that can move over the port. Here are the 2 types of USB connections you're probably most familiar with. There's the rectangular one that's been around for 25 years. This is actually called USB-A. Then there's the more modern USB-C port, which is smaller and has these rounded ends. Now both are called USB, but to call them their proper names, one will be USB-A and the other USB-C. But that's not the only time you hear the term USB. You'll also hear it when it comes to the speed of the port. So for instance, you may hear something is USB 3 or USB 4. This refers to the protocol, kind of like the language that the port speaks. But the practical part of that is speed. USB 4 is faster than USB 3. For instance, if you were transferring data to an external drive, a USB 4 drive would complete the transfer faster than a USB 3 drive. Now, these are the most common terms you'll hear, A and C and 3 and 4, but there are many more. There's actually USB-B, which is kind of a chunky looking square port. You'll see it commonly on the backs of printers. And speed-wise too, the original USB is actually USB 1.0, but there were faster upgrades 1.2, 2.0. Today, most USB 3 ports are actually USB 3.2, and they're actually generations of that, so Gen 1, Gen 2, and all. But always the name or letter refers to the shape of the port, whereas the number refers to the protocol or speed used by the port. But it's important to know that speeds are backwards compatible. So if you have a current Mac that says it has USB 4 ports, you can plug any previous generation of USB into it, and your Mac will be able to handle it just fine. It'll just work at the speed of that older device. By the way, if you find these videos valuable, consider joining the more than 2,000 others that support MacMost at Patreon. You get exclusive content, course discounts, and more. You can read about it at macmost.com/Patreon. What about newer iMacs? Here's the back of a 2024 iMac. It has 4 ports on the back, and there's no label. So are these just USB ports? No, in fact, they're Thunderbolt ports. Apple will simply not label them if they're all Thunderbolt ports. Only if some are Thunderbolt and some are USB will it label the Thunderbolt ports as such. Here's another example. Here are the 3 Thunderbolt ports on a MacBook Pro. There's no label with them. All 3 of them are Thunderbolt. And here is a Mac Studio. On the back are 4 Thunderbolt ports, and you can see they are labeled with a little Thunderbolt above all 4. On the front are 2 more USB-C ports, but those don't have the label. They are, in fact, only USB ports. You can't plug in Thunderbolt devices to those, only the 4 on the back. And in addition to that, if you look closely to the right of the power port there, you'll see 2 older USB-A style ports, and these are also just USB. Now, you don't have to just rely on the symbols here. You can actually look at the tech specs on Apple's site for any of the Macs it sells. For instance, here's the 2024 iMac, and you can see here that the iMac comes in 2 different varieties, one with 2 ports and one with 4 ports, but all of them are Thunderbolt ports. But if we go to the tech specs for the 2023 iMac, the one with 2 labeled with Thunderbolt and 2 not, you could see it clearly shows that there are 2 Thunderbolt ports and 2 USB 3 ports. So back to that 2023 iMac, it's got 2 ports that are clearly labeled as Thunderbolt ports, and that's what they are. The 2 that aren't labeled, well, they're not Thunderbolt ports. They are just USB ports. So what can you do with these ports? Well, with USB ports, you could plug in USB devices. That's simple and straightforward. Thunderbolt ports can do a lot more though. You can plug in USB devices to Thunderbolt ports, but you could also plug in Thunderbolt devices. There are companies that make very fast drives and they work with Thunderbolt, not USB. You can also plug in DisplayPort cables. These are cables that will connect to displays. So Thunderbolt ports can handle many different types of connections. Think of these as languages. It can speak USB, Thunderbolt, and DisplayPort. In addition, with MacBooks, which have batteries, you can use the Thunderbolt port to actually provide power to your MacBook. Regular USB ports can also provide power, but the other way, out to a device. But the Thunderbolt ports on MacBooks can actually be used to power your Mac, just like the MagSafe power port can. That's important to know if you happen to be traveling, say, and you forgot your MagSafe adapter. You can just use one of the Thunderbolt ports to charge your Mac like you do with your iPhone. But notice that both Thunderbolt and USB ports use the USB-C shape. So this is a universal port shape. And this leads to a lot of confusion because if you see a port that looks like this, it could be Thunderbolt or it could just be USB. So what you really want to know is how do you use these ports on your Mac? You may have only Thunderbolt ports, but you may also have USB ports. So let's look at this in terms of priorities. If you've got a Mac Mini or a Mac Studio, you want to connect a display first. That's the most important thing. And if you have a MacBook, you may want to connect a second display in addition to the one that's part of the MacBook itself. So priority 1 is displays. These get connected to Thunderbolt ports because Thunderbolt ports, unlike USB ports, can be used for DisplayPort. Most third-party screens have a DisplayPort connection on the back. So you want to get a DisplayPort cable because that's the language that your Mac is using to talk to the screen. On the one end, you want USB-C because that's the shape of the port on your Mac. On the other end, you want to get something that matches your display. The choices are either DisplayPort or a mini DisplayPort. So check to see which one your display has, get a DisplayPort cable that has the proper connection on each end, and you connect that to a Thunderbolt port on your Mac to hook up the display. But some displays actually have a Thunderbolt port. And if it has that, then you definitely want to take advantage of that and just get a Thunderbolt cable. It would probably be USB-C to USB-C and would have to specify that it is a Thunderbolt cable. You can't just get a USB-C cable. It has to say it's Thunderbolt compatible. So you would connect this Thunderbolt cable from Thunderbolt to Thunderbolt, and that often gets you an added advantage. For instance, on the Apple Studio display means that you can use the display as a USB hub. That's what those other USB ports are on the back. There's one Thunderbolt port. That's your input. So that goes from the Thunderbolt port on your Mac to the Thunderbolt port on the Apple Studio display. The other 3 ports there, they're just USB, and you can attach other devices like, say, hard drives to your display, and then it will connect to your computer through the display. And there are other displays that will also allow Thunderbolt connectivity and give you additional USB ports like this. In addition to that, it also supplies power to a MacBook. So you could actually connect your MacBook up to an Apple Studio display, and then you'll not only get the 3 USB ports in the back of the Studio display, but you'll also power the MacBook through it. So it'll charge the battery up while you're using the display. Now, there are some displays that have both DisplayPort and USB input. In this case, you could, with these displays, connect from Thunderbolt to DisplayPort and also from a USB port on your Mac to the USB input on the display, and then it makes the display act as a hub. You can do this. It's completely optional. You can also just ignore those USB ports on the display if you wish. Now, your second priority is Thunderbolt devices. If you happen to have a Thunderbolt only device or a device that's faster if you connect it via Thunderbolt, like say a very fast external hard drive, then you'd want to use a Thunderbolt port for that. If you use a USB port, it either won't work or more likely it'll work, but just at USB speeds, not at Thunderbolt speeds. So after that, you've just got USB devices. It doesn't matter here whether you connect to USB or Thunderbolt ports. Naturally, if you only have Thunderbolt ports on your Mac, like the 2024 iMac, then you should connect to those Thunderbolt ports. They could be used for Thunderbolt or USB. But if it's only a USB device, use the USB port, not the Thunderbolt port. Leave Thunderbolt open for other things that require Thunderbolt or DisplayPort. An exception may be a Mac like the Mac Studio that has USB ports on the front and Thunderbolt on the back, and you really want to connect a USB device to the back of the Mac Studio. In that case, if you've got the Thunderbolt port, you can use it for USB. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with connecting a USB device to Thunderbolt. It's just that you want to give priority to Thunderbolt only devices if that's needed. I mentioned before about making sure you have a Thunderbolt cable to connect from your Mac to a Thunderbolt display. It's important to make sure you get the right cable if you want to connect Thunderbolt devices. It's not enough just to get a USB-C to USB-C cable. It has to say it's Thunderbolt compatible. And if you need Thunderbolt 4, you want to make sure it says it is Thunderbolt 4 compatible. Same for the newer Thunderbolt 5. A regular USB-C to USB-C cable is only going to work for USB-C devices and won't work for Thunderbolt devices, even though it looks the same. So I do want to talk about one other kind of port as well, and that's an HDMI port. Some Macs have an HDMI port. For instance, a Mac Pro has one, and also there's the Mac Studio. It's got an HDMI port. So you may think, well, HDMI, that's for connecting screens. And you may have a screen that has HDMI on it. So you may think that the best thing to do is connect HDMI to HDMI and use that for your display. But in fact, that's not usually the best, specifically for connecting computer displays. typically you'll get more options on your Mac, like more resolutions you can choose from. And you may get a higher quality image if you use DisplayPort. So what you want to do when connecting a display is you want to use a Thunderbolt port with a DisplayPort cable when connecting to a DisplayPort screen. If a display is Thunderbolt, then naturally you want to use that Thunderbolt port to connect to the display using a Thunderbolt cable. So what's the HDMI for? Well, you would use HDMI if you're connecting to a display that only had HDMI. Hopefully you don't have a display like that. But one reason you might is if you're using a TV as a display, or you just want to connect to a TV, say in your living room, that's not going to have DisplayPort. TVs will have HDMI, so then you've got no choice but to use the HDMI port, use an HDMI cable, and connect your Mac to it. A very common reason to use HDMI is if you're using a projector or large screen in a classroom, meeting room, or auditorium. And in that case, the projector probably only has HDMI, and that's what that port really is for. There are other reasons to use it as well. For instance, if you're a video editor, you may have many displays, and you may use the HDMI to connect to a TV to preview your video to see what it looks like on a regular TV instead of a computer display while you're editing. But in general, to connect a Mac to a regular computer display, you use the Thunderbolt port, not the HDMI port. So to sum it all up, when connecting a display to your Mac, use a Thunderbolt port and either a DisplayPort or Thunderbolt cable. When connecting a Thunderbolt device, like a very fast hard drive, use the Thunderbolt port with a Thunderbolt cable. When using a USB device, you can use a USB port and a USB cable, but you can also use a Thunderbolt port and a USB cable. Hope you found this useful. Thanks for watching.
No, comments or questions?
Do the Thunderbolt ports have a specific polarity? That is, does it matter whether they're right side up or upside down?
Some of the
No.
USB devices have had problems functioning until you turn them over.
Yeah, I was wondering about that with the Thunderbolt. I know on USB-C it doesn't, but I don't have any Thunderbolt equipment, but
It has on some USB-C devices that run better one direction than the other, even though they're not supposed to. But you know what was missing on all this? Nowhere to be found was the SCSI port.
was what?
A SCSI port.
Or Firewire. A lot of
Or
people.
Firewire either. Either 4 or 8.
Well, no, and no Apple top connectors either.
That's right. I still have a bag full of Firewire cables.
Me too.
There's a drawer for them at the office.
Bill George's got a question. Bill?
Bill George, you had your hand up the
Oh,
whole time.
I was on a previous slide where I have a 2019 iMac Intel, and it looks like I'm okay for another year.
We'll see next week.
Well, you know, this sounded very convoluted. I mean, there's got, you know, the different cables and different ports and stuff. I mean, I don't see everybody understanding that stuff. In other words, the cables look the same, almost anyway.
That's right.
just-
They look the same, but they're
Yeah.
not. The USB-C shaped cables can now do the original USB-C function, but they can also do Thunderbolt 4 and Thunderbolt. There's a new Thunderbolt 5, which is even more faster. The Thunderbolt cables and the devices, I doubt anybody here even have them. They're really expensive. The cables are like, you know, 20, 30, 40 bucks each for a cable.
There's another area you got to watch out for too. Some USB cables are charging only. Don't do much with data.
Yeah.
I thought he clarified many questions I've had about cables over the years. I thought that was one of the best videos I've ever seen.
Yeah, most people just, if it plugs in and it fits, it's compatible. Well, yeah, but I did have, when I first got a 16-inch MacBook Pro and wanted to run an external display, and we plugged in a USB-C cable to a hub, wouldn't work. We had to buy a Thunderbolt cable to make it work, or he calls it a DisplayPort cable. Either one. I think the Thunderbolt 4 cable will also run video.
I've got a Mac Studio, and I put a little pigtail on the front of it so I don't keep scratching it, just to attach external devices. And the little pigtail on the USB ports, some are faster than others.
Huh.
I've seen diagrams, which he didn't show, of there's supposed to be little lightning bolt insignias on the end of the cables on the little plastic part that shows you, and then there's supposed to be a different icon for Thunderbolt 4 and Thunderbolt 5, so you can tell which one's which and what speed they can do. But he didn't show any of that up for the cable identification.
Well, you can always go to the VBS to get back on that thing and review it if there's a question.
OWC, MacSales.com, Old World Computing sells all this kind of. They just came out with a brand new super fast Thunderbolt 5 drives and hubs. They're the hubs are like hundreds of dollars just for the hub.
Huh.
But they're
Moving on.
ridiculously fast. They're made for people doing video work.
Second video is by Ellen of Ellen's Tips for iOS, the iPad dock tips for seniors. Make your iPad easier to use. Want to make your iPad easier to navigate? In this video, I'll show you how to customize the iPad dock so your favorite apps are always within reach.
The iPad's dock is where your favorite apps can be quickly accessed when you're ready to complete your tasks on your iPad. In this video, I'll show you everything you need to set up the dock the way you want, including how to effectively use it on your iPad. If we haven't met, I'm Ellen from Ellen's Tips for iOS, where I help seniors master their iPhones and iPads. If you find the video helpful, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. Along the bottom of your home screen and is accessible on every screen in landscape or portrait mode. By default, the dock is split into two sections. On the left are the permanent apps. These typically are apps that you use most frequently and that you've added manually. The right side of the dock populates your recently used apps. You can even see your app library. You can control what you see on this side of the dock inside the Settings app. The dock is always present on the home screen. When you open any app, it is hidden. So if I open Safari, you'll see that the dock is hidden here. If I want to bring up the dock while I'm in Safari, I'll just swipe up from the bottom of the screen to access the dock. You don't want to swipe up too far because you'll come into the app switcher or maybe even close the app. So what you want to do is just swipe up from the bottom of the screen until you see the dock. Apple allows for customization of the dock. You can choose what kind of apps appear in your dock and the removal of the app library if you choose. Here's how to do that. So we've mentioned before that the right side of the dock is reserved for recently used apps, which continually populate as you open new apps on your iPad. If you're not happy with this feature, you can turn it off. So to do that, we're going to locate and open the Settings app. Now we're going to tap on Home Screen and App Library. And now you would toggle off Show Suggested and Recent Apps in the dock. And if you want to remove the app library from the dock as well, you would toggle this switch off. Now I'm going to swipe out of the Settings app and you'll see that right side of the dock has been removed. Once you've removed the app library and suggested and recently used apps from the dock, you can put your favorite apps in this area. So we're on the home screen. We can remove apps from the dock or add apps to the dock. So if I push and hold on the screen until the apps begin to jiggle, if I want to remove apps, I can just drag them up and put them on the home screen. Same thing applies when I want to add an app to the dock. I can just drag it down and add it. The dock, depending on what iPad you have, and I believe that the iPad Pro can hold the most number of apps in the dock, and it might be around 16 or 17. And then I think the least amount for like a regular iPad would be about 13. But you can just drag apps into the dock, and once it's filled, it won't allow you to add any more apps to it. And when you're finished adding or removing the apps that you no longer want to see on your dock, just tap anywhere on the empty screen so that the apps stop jiggling, and now the iPad dock is set up the way you want it. If you want to reorganize your dock, it's the same process as I just went over. Push and hold on an empty area of the screen, and then you can position the apps wherever you want them inside the dock so that the dock is completely set up for you. The dock adds to the multitasking power of the iPad, making it convenient to switch between apps and change apps in split view and slide over. When you use slide over on your iPad, you can simply drag an app from the dock onto the screen to open the app as a floating window. So I'll swipe up from the bottom of the screen to access the dock. I'm going to push and hold on my email app and drag it onto the screen. Floating window. If I want to close that window, if I come up to the three dots at the top and click on it, you'll see an option to close. I'll tap on that, and that slide over window disappears. To use split view on the iPad, you'll drag an app from the dock to the edge of the screen to split the display and use two apps simultaneously. So for right now, I'm going to swipe up from the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and grab the Notes app and drag it over to the very edge of the screen and drop it. So for example, if you're reading an article in Safari and want to take notes on the article, swipe up from the dock, access the Notes app to open the notes in split view. I have a more detailed video on multitasking on the iPad, and I'll put a link in the video description. Now you know how to make the most of the iPad dock, from adding your favorite apps to using it for multitasking. Once you set it up the way you like, you'll find it's a real time saver and makes navigating your iPad much easier. Be sure to check the video description for that link to my more detailed multitasking video if you'd like to explore that next. If you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.
No, comments or questions? Moving on. Third video is by Gary Rosenzweig, MacMost.com. Using Remind Me to keep your Mac mail inbox clean. If you like a clean email inbox, the Mac Mail Remind Me feature can help. It allows you to set a reminder in the Mail app for a message that will work to alert you and bring the message back into your inbox even after you archive it.
Hi, this is Gary with MacMost.com. Let me show you how to keep your mail inbox clean by using the Remind Me feature. Now I'd like to keep my mail inbox clean, nothing in it. If there is something there, then I take care of it right there and then when I'm checking email. Sometimes that just means reading the message. Other times it means responding. Sometimes you have to take an action, do something, and then respond. In some cases, I'll add a calendar event, for instance. In other cases, I may add something to my to-do list in the Reminders app. Now, in the past, if there's something there that I just can't take care of right now, instead of leaving the item in my mail inbox, I add something to Reminders to remind me to do it later on, either something with a specific time deadline or just something to my to-do list. And then I archive the email so I can keep my inbox clean. But starting with macOS 13, there's a way for you to keep your inbox clean, but also get reminded to take care of some tasks later on without going to another app. For instance, say you get a message like this, and it's something that you just want to take care of later. You don't want to be bothered with it right now. But you want to clean out your inbox, so you could just add a to-do list item in the Reminders app so you remember to get to it later on when you got some free time. But you can do this inside of the Mail app using a feature that's here. Now, you're not going to find it as a button here in the toolbar or any obvious way to do this. But if you go to the Message menu with that message selected, you'll find a whole submenu called Remind Me. And you could set Mail to actually remind you about this message in an hour, later tonight, tomorrow, or set a specific time. Instead of remembering where that is in the menu bar, you could simply use the context menu. So that's a right click on a mouse, 2-finger click on a trackpad, or hold Control and click on the message. And Remind Me is right here as well. So this will work on that message the same way the menu item does. Now, if you select one of the first three, then you're done. It'll just remind you in an hour, tonight, or tomorrow. If you select Remind Me Later, it gives you this little calendar interface, and you could set a specific date. And you can do this by typing. You can tab between these fields. You can click in the little calendar interface. There are buttons here to go forward and backward months. Click the dot there to jump to the current month. And you can set the time here. You can tab forward to the hour and minute and AM or PM, or you can click here as well. You could also just use these arrows to say increase the minute by 1 or 2. And you can even drag the hour hand here in this clock to make it really easy. So I could set this to say, remind me at some point in the future and schedule. Now, when I've done that, I get this little clock indicator here showing me that I've set a remind me for this message. I also find it here inside of Remind Me underneath Favorites. So far so good, except that it's still there in my inbox, which isn't what I want. I want to clear this out. Maybe if this is going to remind me tomorrow, I don't want it cluttering up my inbox, making me look at it each time I'm going through my mail for the next day. Well, you could just go ahead and archive this message as you might normally do using this button, or I like to use the keyboard command Control, Command, and A. And it will actually archive the message, just like you're done with it, except it's still going to be here in Remind Me. By the way, if you find these videos valuable, consider joining the 2,000 others that support Mac most at Patreon. You get exclusive content, course discounts, and more. You can read about it at macmost.com/Patreon. So the first thing is this Remind Me list here is basically a list of links to messages that in this case are in my archive folder, but they also could be remaining in my inbox. So I can go through these later on. So maybe I set this Remind Me for tomorrow, but I do have some time later in the day, so I can go in here, select the message, and maybe take care of the task even earlier than I expected to. Note when you select a message that has a Remind Me set, it shows you at the top here, Mail will remind you about this message, and then when. And you can click Edit and edit that. So you could set it for later or sooner, for instance, or click Remove Reminder to take that reminder away completely. So if I took care of this task right now, then I could click Remove Reminder. It would disappear from Remind Me. I've already taken it out of my inbox, so that means it's just going to remain in my archive folder, just like if I completed the task when I originally got the message. Otherwise, when the time arrives, what will happen is two things. First, I should get a notification depending on my notification settings. And the second thing is that it should move back into my inbox. If I was already in my inbox, I'm just going to have a little message there at the top of my inbox letting me know that this item has now reached its remind me time. One interesting thing to know is if you just stay here on the inbox, it may not actually appear here right away. But if you leave and go somewhere else, like I'll look at my flagged messages here and then go back to the inbox, then you can see the inbox updates through that action. And now I see how this message has returned to my inbox even though I moved it to the archive folder, because that's part of what Remind Me will do. And you can see it's no longer in the Remind Me list, as now it's returned to the inbox. And you can see at the top it says now Mail reminded you about this message. And now I can take care of it, or I can edit and then push it back even further. So if somebody sends you a message asking you to do something periodically, you can actually still use this like that. You can now edit this message and set it to, for instance, remind you at the end of the month, and then archive it. And then when you get that reminder, you can change it to the end of the next month and archive it again. So the message will keep coming back to you. But if you're already using the Reminders app to remind you of things like this, or the Calendar app to remind you of things, and maybe even have a recurring event in the Calendar app, then by all means continue using that. It's probably a slightly better method. But this is a good method for when it's just a simple email and you really quickly just want to dismiss it, get it out of your inbox, but still make sure that you're going to get a reminder about it at some point in the future. And note this is also available on the iPhone and iPad. All you need to do is tap that reply button at the bottom and you can see Remind Me is one of the options you have, and you set it up in a similar way. This isn't a function of iCloud email. You can use it with any email service that you happen to be using with the Mail apps. Hope you found this useful. Thanks for watching.
Comments or questions?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. All right.
Well, I find it hard to believe that his mailbox is empty.
I believe him. It's easy to do. If you do something, I have 0 unread messages in my inbox ever. Message comes in, I do something with it. I read it, I may leave it there, and I need to do some more, but there's no unread messages in my mailbox. It's not empty like his. As opposed to some of you who have tens of thousands of unread messages in your inbox.
Fourth video is by Techie of techietutor.com. Supercharge your productivity with Apple Notes and Reminders. Learn how to supercharge your productivity with Apple Notes and Reminders. Discover how to create reminders in your iPhone and link them to your notes for maximum efficiency.
Do you get annoyed when you can't link your files to a calendar or a reminder? Or do you use Apple Notes and wish there was a way to include a reminder for the note you created? I get a lot of questions about that. And in this video, I will show you how to supercharge your productivity by combining Apple Notes with Apple Reminders so that you can find this powerful integration lets you turn your notes into actionable reminders so that you never miss a task or a deadline. I'm Karen, and I make videos to help people with their technology. Stay tuned to the end, and you'll find out how you can access my digital downloads. So let's dive in. The Notes app is a terrific tool on your iPhone. If you sync with iCloud, any note you create on your iPhone will also be available on your iPad, your laptop, or your desktop. You can create different folders from your notes. So let's go right into the Notes app. When you open your Notes app, the first thing you're going to see are all the folders you've created. And at the bottom of your folders, you'll see all the tags. Notes app is a great place to jot down quick notes, to create tables, to create quick lists, to manage projects, anything you can think of. It's also a great app if you need to scan documents. I have another video about that, and it'll be linked above. But let's get back to using notes with reminders. I've added folders to stay organized, and the folders are in these categories. I have a quick to-do list, I have another folder called Holiday Party, another folder called Work, Ideas, Projects, and then Areas. Areas is actually an outside folder. When you open it up, you'll see nested inside that folder, I've actually organized a lot of different areas of my life into specific folders. And the power of notes is that you might want your medical records easily accessible so that when you're visiting the doctor, you have them. So I have a folder called Health, and if I want to add a recent lab result, I can create a new note, and then I can use the camera icon to scan it, or I can bring it in from the website portal. So watch me as I turn a note into a reminder. I'm going to open up my party folder, and inside I have created a note because I'm planning a party for my friend Bill. It's his birthday. Don't tell him I'm planning anything. It's also a surprise. So I've made a list of things I need to do. I need to get the gifts. I need to wrap the gifts. I need to think of a menu, shop for food, bake cookies, cleaning. You know what I forgot to do? Let me add it. I'm going to go to the beginning where it says get all gifts. And I'm going to write send, invite, press return, and now I've added what I forgot. Of course, I have to invite people, otherwise Bill's going to be pretty bored. Now I have my list. What I want to do is I want this list to be available in reminders so that I can find it easily. I'm going to open the note for Bill's birthday party. I'm going to find the box that has the arrow pointing up. It's right at the top. And I'm going to share the note to reminders right here. Now, you'll notice that once I press share to reminders, I'm seeing everything in my note. So let's press add, and now it's there. Now let's go open up reminders right here, and I'm going to go back to reminders and go find that. It should be at the bottom, Bill's birthday party. So look what happens when I press the note. It goes right back to the note. That's pretty awesome. So just showing you again, the beauty of reminders is that if you look at the very right side of your reminder, in any reminder, you'll see an icon. And that icon is telling you that this reminder will link back to a note. Okay, now that you have linked your note to reminders, let's see what we can do. Open up reminders. Go to the list that's called My Reminders and go to the bottom. You should be able to see what you just added, Bill's birthday party. But I don't want to link back to the note. I want to give this a date-specific reminder so that it will actually alert me on a date. So I'm going to press I. I'm going to toggle the switch for date on, and I'll select a day. I need to have this all done by the 30th because the party is the following day. So I've done that. I want an early reminder. I want it to be 3 days before. I'm going to press custom and make it 3 days earlier. Press done. And now you'll see that under Bill's birthday party at the very bottom, there's a date. And on that early reminder date, I'm going to get a reminder on my phone, and that will just keep me organized. So you'll notice in reminders, I have a section for menu. This is when I want to plan something for the week so I know what I'm shopping. Anyway, I have all these items in my menu. If I want to actually see the recipe to check that I really want to make it, what I'm going to do is press on the notes icon. It will go right to the note, and then I can see the recipe and decide if I really want to have that for this week. I wanted to just take a moment to talk to you about tags. I had mentioned it earlier in the video. So you'll see that on my iPhone, I'm at the very beginning of my Notes app where it shows me all the folders. Now, if I scroll all the way to the bottom, you're going to see all the tags I have. I'm going to select the dinner tag. And when I do that, I'm going to see all the notes that I have actually tagged dinner. Let's open one of them. And let's look at what it shows you. So this is a recipe I saved. I'm going to look it over, and if this is something that I might want to make for dinner, then I'm going to save it to my menu in reminders and cook it. But how did I get it tagged? At the very bottom of the note, you'll see it says hashtag dinner. I'm going to show you how to add a tag. go ahead and press the pound sign or the hashtag. And then I'm going to add the word vegetarian because it's a vegetarian recipe. Okay, so now I have 2 tags, dinner and vegetarian. When I'm done, they'll be there. So if I wanted to find maybe vegetarian, then I would go to my tags and click on vegetarian. Now I'm going to see that same recipe is there because I've tagged it dinner and vegetarian, along with all these other recipes that may or may not be for dinner, but they are vegetarian. So I've showed you this because I find that tags are very useful. You're going to have to decide for yourself whether it's better to have more folders or use tags to help you stay organized. Let me know in the comments, are you a tag person or a folder person? Or do you go right to the smart folder? Integrating Apple Notes with Apple Reminders is a simple yet powerful way to keep you and your tasks organized. Give it a try and let me know below how it works for you. You can find all my videos available by clicking my channel page below. In the comments, I've also linked how you can access my digital downloads. Thanks for watching. If you found my video helpful, please click the like button and subscribe so you'll always know when my videos are available. See you next time on Techie Tutor.
Well, do you have comments or questions? Fifth video is Gary again, using Mac mail categories and how to turn them off. The new mail inbox categories feature helps you get through your inbox by dividing messages into separate categories. You can manually control which senders end up in which categories. You also have 2 ways to view your inbox as it looked before.
Hi, this is Gary with MacMost.com. Let's take a look at the new Mail Categories feature in macOS. So once you've upgraded to macOS Sequoia 15.4, Mail looks a little bit different. It's got something in it called categories. Now, these might not be completely new to you because previously they were available in iOS and iPad OS, so you may have seen them there as well. But this is the first time they're on the Mac. Basically, what it looks like is this. In the Mail app, you see these 5 buttons here at the top. The last one's just a little bit out of sight. And these are 5 different ways of viewing your inbox. So you either need to have all inboxes selected, or if you have multiple accounts, you can select just one inbox. But notice they won't appear in other situations. Like if you look at your archive, say, it's not there. So this is an inbox feature. What this does is it attempts to make it easier to get through your inbox by categorizing things in 4 different categories. There's primary, then there's transactions, then there's updates, and there's promotions. And that's how you can view each of these 4 things just by clicking here at the top. So what are they? Well, the transactions one is going to try to show you receipts and things like that. You actually see a description of it here at the top. And after the first time you review this, you can dismiss it and you won't be bothered with it again. The updates one is for things like when you get regular newsletters or updates from some website, it puts them in there. And the promotions one is for special deals, offers, coupons, that kind of thing. And what Mail attempts to do is it attempts to categorize each mail that comes in as one of these things. The default collection is primary. So in other words, if it doesn't fit in one of those, it's going to appear here in primary. Also, sometimes if it does appear in one of those, but it seems to be very important, it will be in both primary and in one of these 3 categories. By the way, if you find these videos valuable, consider joining the more than 2,000 others that support MacMost at Patreon. You get exclusive content, course discounts, and more. You can read about it at macmost.com/Patreon. Now, the categorization is automatic, but you do have some control. For instance, let's say I want to move all emails from this person here into the updates category. I can do that by control clicking right-clicking or two-finger click on a trackpad on it, and I should see categorize sender here. It should be set to automatically, but I can have it always categorized as one of these four. So it's just going to look at who the email is from, and whenever you get a new email from that person, it's going to go into one of these categories automatically. You can also do it up here by clicking on the name or email address that you see here, and there's categorize sender there as well. If you find something is going into a category and it shouldn't, like let's say you don't want these going into transactions, and you can use the same techniques here to have it go to, say, primary instead to make sure that it doesn't get into one of those other three buckets. Unfortunately, there's no way to be more precise than that. You can't like filter based on keywords or some other content in the message. If you ever want to see the definitions for the different categories again, you can go into View, and there's About Categories here. This brings up this window and it describes each category again and gives you more information. For instance, when a message goes into transactions, updates, promotions, but includes time-sensitive information, in other words, the content in it seems to suggest a deadline of some sort, it will also appear in primary, like I said before. You also have a button here to reset all the manual configurations. So if you set a bunch of messages to manually go to a certain category and then find it's not working for. Now, as you can imagine, in addition to a lot of people not caring either way for this new feature, there are a lot of people that love it, that have actually been asking for this, and also a lot of people that hate it and immediately want to know how to go back to how it was before. And there are actually two methods for doing that. One allows you to keep the categories here at the top in case you want to use them, but simply view things like they were before. Remember I said there were 5 buttons here and you can see this other one just out of sight? Well, the 5th one is actually All Mail. If you click on it, it reveals itself and primary is condensed into a smaller button. And now you can see all messages here. And this is the same as it was before. You still have the buttons here at the top. So if you want to dig into one of these, you can. But by sticking with All Mail, just leaving it like that, you have an inbox that looks like it did before without completely turning the feature off. This is in fact how I've been using it, with All Mail selected here, but the buttons still active in case. And here's another useful tip. You can use 2 fingers on a trackpad and swipe to go between 2 of these. For instance, let's select transactions here. If I swipe to the left, it goes to All Mail. I swipe to the right, it goes to transactions. If I select primary instead, then I can swipe back and forth across these buttons to go between primary and All Mail. Now let's say you really do just want to completely get rid of it. Well, you can do that pretty easily. You can go to View, and then it's just a check mark here. Show Mail Categories. You can also get to it with this 3 dots button, which also has About Categories, and you can turn off Show Mail Categories here as well. And then it goes away and it looks exactly like it did before, but you could easily turn it on again if you ever want to give it another try. So it certainly isn't going to be for everybody. If it's not for you, just turn it off. If you think it might make getting through your daily email inbox a little easier, then give it a try over the next days and weeks. Hope you found this useful. Thanks for watching.
Comments or questions?
Hate it.
I used to delete things and it went to the trash can with my old computer. My new MacBook Pro, when you delete something, it's gone. How do you get things to go from
It's
your email?
going, if you use an iPad or an iPhone and you read your mail and you delete it, like especially Gmail, by default it goes into archive. But you can, and so when you look on your Mac, you won't see it in the trash. It's in the archive folder. But you can change that on your phone and your iPad in the settings for the mail account, especially Gmail. It says, what do you do when you delete a message? By default, goes to archive. You can change it and say, put it in the trash, and then it'll show up on the trash on your Mac. That's probably what's going on.
Oh, the MacBook Pro. And you need to go to settings and
No. if you have an iPhone, it's probably happening because you're deleting the messages on the iPhone and they're going in the archive
She has a
instead of the
MacBook
trash.
Pro.
You don't own an iPhone or an iPad?
I'm talking about MacBook Pro. When
Okay.
you delete an email, it just goes, it's gone.
There
It
should be
used to be
there
that
should
when
be a trash can. You should be able to see the trash.
it's not in the trash anymore. The trash can is totally empty. So how do you get your email to go into the trash can?
Wait, did you try deleted items? Look at your deleted items
No, I
in the
just
left-hand side of your screen.
the email, the list, I just go to trash can. It used to be all dumped in there, and then I would go through it a second time and delete things if I wanted to. So how do you get your email to go to the trash can?
What email address are you talking about? A Gmail or something else?
It's just my email.
Is it
What's your
Google
email?
or is it
What's
SBC
your
Global?
what's your email address at? Comcast, at Gmail, at what does your address end in? What kind of
Gmail,
account? What's your email address? Tell us your email address.
homegrandma@gmail.com.
Okay, so you have Gmail. It
Right.
could be you have your Mac set to put it in archive. That's a possibility. You have an archive folder?
I'm sure, but I've never gone there. I'll go there and see what's going on. I assume it's empty because I never want to archive anything.
Well, it's hard because your machine is tied up with Zoom right now and you can't look at it.
Right. I'll do that another time.
And I'd like to look at mine because I think there's either a trash can or maybe the trash can is called deleted items.
No,
But
it's called all trash. It's called trash on the Mac.
yeah,
So
okay.
when you want, my simple question is, when you want to take your email to the trash can, do you just slide it over to the trash can?
Just right click on it and it'll give
Yeah.
you an
Oh,
option to what you want to do with it.
okay. Okay. I'll
On
try.
your MacBook Pro, it'd be a two-finger click if you've got that set up.
Or just swipe it to the left. You get the option to delete it.
Okay.
I never do that. I
Yeah,
always
delete
in
is easy. Delete is just swipe it to the left, the little red badge goes up and it's gone.
I always
in
Right
right
the
on it.
click.
It's
in the
interesting.
settings
Or
for
just
your Gmail, I have an answer if somebody will let me speak. If you go into your account,
Go ahead, Joe.
Mail Preferences Accounts, and look at your Gmail, under Mailbox Behavior, you get to choose where it goes. Trash mailbox can be the trash, it can be archive, it could be going into the wrong folder, it could be going in the archive folder. It's a possibility. You look and
Okay.
see what the trash mailbox is set to. It should be set to Gmail trash if that's what you want it to look for it at.
Okay.
You need to check that, see where it's going. It's going somewhere.
Okay. I'll try that out.
Like I say, on the iPhone, it's set to default to archive instead of trash. On the Mac, I don't think the default is actually set that way. But it could be.
All right, we'll move on. Moving on to miscellany. Just one quick item here. Thanks to Tom Wells from Proper Honest Tech. Did you know that on a Mac, you don't need to copy and paste a URL from an address bar? You can simply drag and drop. So if you're looking to share a link with someone, for example, just drag the URL from the address bar of Safari into whatever app you need it to go to. And so I've got a picture here of dragging a URL onto a Pages document. It could also be into a email or something like that that you want to share with somebody. So it's just a matter of preference. I find Command C copy, Command V paste probably easier, but maybe somebody likes dragging over copy paste. On to question and answers and social hour.
Oh, that was a nice effect.
Okay, and you're only on your screen share. End your screen share, and I'll start a new recording. Lee, only on your screen share. Oh, and okay. So anybody watching this on YouTube, DVMUG members, you can get the next section of the recording, which will be Q&A, or the link on the DVMUG BBS. So see you there.